All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. This is Rich Swerbinsky with the Mortgage Collaborative. I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of their afternoon for the latest on our TMC Connect platform session devoted to the state of the FHA secondary market. This is, I think, the fifth installment of this call we've done. It continues to produce strong numbers and interest and demand and a lot of positive comments. So why reinvent the wheel? We keep bringing this group back every 3 weeks or so to reassess the state of where things are at with selling FHA loans into the secondary market. Once again, we have our three discussion leaders that we've had for these calls. Our first ever lender member and the chairman of our lender board of directors, the CEO of Altera Home Loans, Jason Matieto. Jason, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Rich, thank you for having me once again.
The chief lending officer of PRMG, Kevin Peranio. Kevin, thank you.
Happy to be here. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, TMC team.
And of course, the man that needs no introduction, Rob Krisman. Rob, thank you as always for everything you do for our network.
Sure.
All right, let's get into it here. So I always start with Jason. His organization originates a high percentage of government loans and has provided some really good boots on the ground intel on the state of the FHA secondary market, starting from the really aggressive disintermediation we saw right when the market started to change in mid-March and through the evolution. So I'll start again with Jason. Would love it, Jason, if you could just provide your perspective on the current state of the FHA secondary market.
Sure. Thanks, Rich. So yeah, when we started, there was a huge disparity between the FHA coupon price and what we were getting out in the market, and there was even more disparity between those that were Ginnie Mae issuers and those that weren't. So we expected that it was going to last a few months and that we would see some challenges there for those lenders that were non-direct Ginnie seller servicers or issuers, I should say. That has changed. I mean, the dynamic has changed decently enough. I think it's taking a little longer than we all expected in the aggregator market. But I'll just give you a snapshot of what today looks like in FHA, I think, and we can go from there. There are very few outliers in the aggregation market, and they really don't want anything under really about 660. So 660 and above is where there's reasonable pricing if you're not delivering directly to Ginnie. Matter of fact, even against coupon 680 and above, it's about 40 basis points or right around 25 to 40 basis points better than the coupon price on FHA. So we're already starting to see some aggregators give up some of that, MSR value into their pricing. Not too many though. I think not everyone's really ready to dip their toe in, but at least companies like AmeriHome are coming out very aggressive. Mr. Cooper is stepping back in from being, backing off so far as they were when this all started. They're back in the game, and so you're seeing that really happen in about the 660 FICO and up. It gets really aggressive above 680. But the 640 or 660 under, the temperature's still about the same. What we're seeing is somewhere around about 220 basis points off of coupon, and I think that's just generally the aggregators are generally afraid of that FICO and that borrower still, and then you get down to the 620 FICO, and it's like 300 plus basis points off coupon, and clearly still not as aggressive as it used to be pre-COVID. I think where really the competition is a little bit unknown and it's a little bit race to the bottom, is all the retail players that have a Ginnie Mae ticket are really getting aggressive and seems to be playing around in terms of competition of everything under what the aggregators are really looking to get. Everything under 660. I think as lenders, we have to be careful of making sure that we are not adversely selecting ourselves to take on all the low FICO risk and then ship over because of cash needs, et cetera, all the 680 FICO and above to the aggregators, right? Because you still have some counterparty risk that still lives there, but now you're adversely selecting yourself on the loans that may not perform as well as you want them to perform. There is a little bit of flying blind in that space because no one really knows exactly who's pricing where, which is the way it's supposed to be. But again, like I said, the Ginnie Mae issuers that have retail origination channels are playing a lot more aggressively under 660. Still got to be careful not to adversely select yourself. We have, since we started, because when we talked about this in our last calls, our company shifted to issue and retain. So we have about 1,000 loans now over the last couple months that we've put into servicing. I do have a good thing to report. Out of all the FHAs, we have one loan that went into forbearance. It just seems like it's different. Now we have about 14 loans total that did go into forbearance out of about 1,000, and that's a mixture of FHA and conventional, of Ginnie and the other agencies. But it seems like right after, we didn't start doing that until after April. Obviously, it was really more of May and June payments, which is just passed, have been performing well. Everyone that's had a job has stayed with their job, and now jobs are coming back a little slower than I think everybody wants, but they're coming back. Definitely a little slower than everybody wants in Nevada, but it's coming back. And we have a very low default rate right now. It's 1%. So we're in good shape. The market's strong.
That's awesome. One question for you, Jason, before we move on to Kevin. Typically when you see market shifts like this, you'll see players that will step into vacated spaces and attempt to maybe pick up market share, pick up some new customers. Have there been any aggregators that have stepped into that 620 to 660 space more aggressively, maybe as a business development strategy, based on what's going on right now?
Well, Jason did a good job explaining that AmeriHome has stepped in. We've definitely seen them step in. Freedom has been a big buyer lately. We're very cautious because they have such an aggressive retention team. But I think last month we sold them 20 loans just because the price was just too good. And, they're a very well-run company. Stan Middleman has been waiting for this moment, waiting for the market to get to a point to where people with big balance sheets and capital could deploy, and he's starting to make his move. Penny Mac has come in a little bit. So, I would just add that, I think last week we saw about 20% of our bids go out to aggregators. So we're still servicing at a very high level, still retaining about 80%. I'll echo that on our new loans. I think we've tripled our portfolio. We're over 20,000 units in our portfolio now. Have FHA borrowers that have requested forbearance on new loans. And on our old loans, we're at about 11% of FHA that have requested forbearance, but we're finding about 40% of those are still making the payments. So we feel like, at least for now, this is kind of the forbearance thing is a big nothing burger, and because our data backs that up, we keep hammering these aggregators and saying, we don't want to pay your crappy prices, so we're going to keep servicing until you give us a better bid, and we're okay to do that, and so I think that's kind of been our strategy on the Govy side, just from our perspective.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that is, Rich, is also what it does for your efficiency in underwriting and post-closing and delivery. On top of the price, now going back to delivery or aggregator delivery, they're really going to have to come in very strong to sort of pull us away from delivering the way we're delivering now, because the efficiencies it creates across the board it's pretty strong. And you have to start now changing your post-closing processes to now go back to aggregator delivery.
Thanks, Jason.
Have you noticed, Jason? Did you hear about Bank of New York Mellon, BNY, where they had to shut down their collateral center because of a COVID-19 scare? So they aren't drawing notes. Have you heard, has that trickled its way up to you?
No, it hasn't trickled back to me, but I'm gonna go ask as soon as we hang up here. So Kev, we use a Boni, but we are transitioning out of Boni because we are getting into e-notes, and they don't have an e-vault, and Boni will not process that. So
right, we set up Deutsche Bank to help with that, for that initiative. Thank God we did, because they were able to alleviate some of that. But it's crazy. It's like, here we are thinking we're dodging all these bullets. You're coming to our company. We're servicing more loans, and then you rely on one or two people to actually drive the notes and give you collateral so you can move things along. It's just there's always something you're navigating out here.
Right. It's never a dull moment. But Kevin, yeah, I think if you're talking about a week or two ago, maybe I didn't hear the reason why, but it seemed like everything froze at Bank of New York Mellon, and it was a little challenging. But they did unstick it, but it did delay a lot of trades and a lot of settlements, which does have a huge impact on cash and your warehouse lines, right? The capacity. So I think that's what you're talking about. Yeah, we totally felt it.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent. Rob, our members always love hearing your perspective on industry issues, particularly those related to the capital markets. Would love to hear your thoughts as kind of the eyes and ears of the industry on some of the developments and progress maybe you're seeing with the government lending capital markets.
Well, thank you, Rich. Before I launch into I've got about a 15-minute dissertation on what I'm seeing out there. But before I do, I wanted to ask Jason and Kevin, MERS, you guys, I assume that you use MERS, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And the service has been good and so forth. I didn't know, I have a naive question. Does any lender out there not use MERS right now?
Complete and total monopoly.
We do, and I don't know anybody who's not.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The topic came up this morning. Somebody asked me this morning about it, and I thought, yeah, I think everybody does now. So, Rich, in answer to your question, the talk out there. First of all, you're right. Things have quieted down quite a bit. We're certainly not seeing the volatility that we saw in mid-March, late March, and into April. Rates have quieted down significantly. The program changes have quieted down significantly, and it's kind of like back to where we were in January and February and early March in terms of just a lot of lenders out there doing one loan at a time or a lot of loans at a time and going about their business and trying to help their borrowers with the programs that are out there. The rates, not so much of a discussion topic. They haven't been a discussion topic for a while just because rates are so good. I mean, who can argue with a 3 1/8 or a 2 7/8 30-year fixed rate loan? It's really tough to do. So the thing that I'm hearing though out there is that there's a undercurrent or a stirring, whatever you want to call it, of thought that at some point later this year, the servicing market is going to be deluged with pools of servicing, blocks of servicing from independent mortgage banks, thinly capitalized, maybe not so thinly capitalized, but companies who have been holding on to their servicing now because the aggregators have not been so aggressive, although the aggregators are coming back. But at some point, these smaller players who have held on to their servicing are perhaps going to want to sell. Whether that's Labor Day or Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas, whenever. there's some thinking out there that packages of servicing, especially FHA, VA servicing, Ginnie Mae servicing, are going to start to hit the market. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to the price of servicing if that is indeed the case. In terms of forbearance, I know we'll be getting the MBA's numbers here shortly. I would, if I had to guess, I wouldn't think the Ginnie Mae forbearance percentage will change much. I think it's been about 11.8%. I would expect, though, that in general forbearance will start to decrease, or certainly level off, if not decrease. I think it's pretty much leveled off. So we would expect to see it decrease after a while. But back to the Ginnie Mae side, I haven't heard, in my conversations with Ginnie servicers, much change. I think Jason's got a great portfolio, in terms of the forbearance situation. But so I'm not hearing much movement there. But I think the overriding concern right now, and it's not even an overriding concern, it's more of a feeling that when companies start to sell servicing, especially Ginnie servicing later this year, we could see some price volatility there. So that's what I'm hearing out there, Rich.
Great point, and I think something Jason and Kevin both alluded to. Kevin, I'll start with you on this one. What do you think about Rob's comments? It seems to make sense, right, on the servicing side?
It's an excellent point, because servicing loans is a drain on cash. So, you have to be committed as a lender to want to service and spend your money there. And then do you want to hang on to it long term? So there are a lot of lenders out there that, they kind of got forced into this. And so they spent their cash and they're going to want to get it back out, later. When? Obviously the best time to sell is when rates start to go back up. We find a cure, we're out of the recession. Who knows when that's going to be, so that's your ideal time, buy low, sell high. But there are going to be some lenders out there who, they just need the cash to operate. Now, you can pledge your servicing rights. You can take out money against them and take a cash out lien against it. We've never done that at PRMG. My last company I was part owner in, we did that. We had a small little $330 million portfolio, and we took $1.8 million out against it. All Fannie Mae loans, all refis from the spring of '09, and then we needed cash because we were small, and it was hard to get cash back then. So, there's a lot of options. There'll be a lot of bottom feeders out there. There's a lot of bottom feeding going on in the non-QM market. It's no different. You got people that got held up, with loans that they couldn't sell. And, I read somewhere today that PIMCO is out, thumbing around. They were like 90% of the buyers for non-QM before everything got pulled back. So, some people think they purposely pulled back so they could create some opportunity. And we're going to see some of that with the A paper and the Govy paper as well. So it's a really excellent point that Rob brings up. And, we're not buyers, we're organic growers. We like our portfolio. Jason brought up a really good point about the efficiencies it brings. We use a lot of tools like FinLocker and Sales Boomerang and some other things like that to, our CRMs, to monitor loans in our portfolio. So we feel we have as good a control on our loans as ever right now. And so we like our asset. We think it's a good asset to hold because we feel like this paper could stick for quite some time, just inherently because of the rate, but then also because of all the better mechanisms that we have. So, ultimately we think this is a good way to stay in, touch with the client, have good contact, deepen that relationship, and keep the asset and have good ROI on the cash we spent to grow the portfolio.
Kevin, I've heard the same thing about Redwood Trust. And I know, Rich, this is an FHA, VA call, Ginnie Mae call, but I for a while there, I still like to say that this industry is, has an 8-year memory and a 10-year business cycle kind of business. And it seems like some companies have even shorter memories than that, because Redwood Trust, as Redwood Trust quickly wound down in March a lot of companies said, I wouldn't buy loans. A lot of people out there said, I'm done with Redwood Trust. If I never sell them another loan, good riddance. We underwrote these loans for them, and now they're not buying loans, and we're left holding the bag. And now they're back in the market. And I think the same companies are going to start selling to them again, which, God bless Redwood Trust, but I think it shows that the resiliency of this marketplace in terms of lenders who are genuinely trying to help their borrowers get the best program for those borrowers, whether it's somebody they've always used like Wells Fargo or Chase, more of a newcomer like AmeriHome or PennyMac. They're not so much newcomers anymore, or somebody who went out of the market and then came back in, like a Redwood Trust, and like some of the non-QM investors that we're seeing out there. So, you have companies out there who, despite what they may have thought about a Redwood Trust, say 3 months ago, are now once again focusing on their borrowers' best interest and saying, what's our best execution here, even if it's only a few basis points. And I would imagine Jason's company is doing the same thing. It's like, who's going to give me the best price for my loans, whether it's, us retaining the servicing, whether it's servicing released. How am I going to best help my borrower, do the deal and get them the best price possible. So it's been interesting. It's interesting watching the evolution of some of these big investors out there and what they're doing, whether it's FHA, VA, or non-QM or jumbo.
I think, Rob, we're always looking for the best price. I think that's everyone. I think we do need to not make sure that we don't forget some of the relationships that I think that we form that will help you in sometimes the downtimes. But going back to that servicing comment you made, I think that's really important. I think the lenders that the companies that got forced into retention, like us, have to think about what does that servicing strategy look like going forward. We had one in the past, we moved away from one, now we're forced into one. What do we do with it? And I think that's a really important point. I think owners, boards, executives, everyone needs to be getting together and figuring that out. What kind of cash what does it take in terms of volume of servicing to drop cash back into the business and start to add value? What does that look like? I think Kevin, a little bit alluded to with sales boomerang to portfolio retention. What does that look like? Because there is some dollars in portfolio retention if the book gets big enough. Do you even have an inside sales team or some sort of portfolio retention team that could keep the book going, but also adding value from a cash perspective as that turns from time to time? As far as flooding the market, I think that's going to be a slippery slope because it has an impact. I think there's two things that we need to be looking at. One is, what kind of values are you putting on your servicing book today? And is it way high, above market, at market, maybe slightly below market? Are you thinking about what that's going to look like? Because you may have to write that down later on. So all those nice, fat, juicy write-ups you have now may have to be written down a little later. And I think of what plays into that a lot, Rob and Kevin, is and get your perspective on it, is the size, right? So you're kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't, because if you only retain a little bit and you're at 100, 200, 300 million, you're going to be, you're going to get the worst pricing possible if you don't enter into some sort of co-issue structure. And this is maybe what you should be looking at as we're talking to people on the other members is, do you have a co-issue structure now? And if you don't, go get one, get a few of them, because you might be able to flow some of this smaller volume, if it's smaller volume, into sort of a front end deal and then follow up with a co-issue deal so that you can make it a little juicier. But if you're not above 500 to $1 billion in servicing and you want to put that out in the market, you're going to be disparately impacted in terms of valuation because no one wants to buy smaller books of volume. You might want to look at where that may work in a co-issue structure rather than trying to just put your books out there for sale come fall or whenever.
We've had a few questions come in, and just a reminder to everybody on the call, please, your questions, comments, experiences, please feel free to drop those in the chat or the Q&A.
Hey, Rich.
Yep.
I'm gonna take this meeting over if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So you see this question is for you. You see a wide variety of the Mortgage Collaborative clients. You have a sense of their mood. You have a sense of kind of what's going on out there in general. What are you seeing in terms of not only FHA, VA lending, but just what's the mood like out there? What's your client base going through right now? Is everybody upbeat? Are people worried? What's going on?
People are really upbeat. It's really changed dramatically in the last few months. I mean, I think everything started to change in March and mid-March. And, there was about 45 days of just terror from everybody, not knowing what the hell was going on and how it was going to impact their business, and forbearance and buybacks, especially our independent mortgage bank members, really worried about, the impact that could have on their business. But now it's much different. I think everybody's obviously done tons of volume and at pretty good margins these last few months, and built up a nice little war chest, and made a lot of money. And the anticipation is that it's going to stay busy for a while. I think that's everybody's expectation right now. So I think people feel good. And if anything, it's just, what we keep hearing is just operational turn times. It's been busy for so long, trying to get people back in the office. If that is a priority of companies, and trying to marry that with just the, kind of the nonstop flood of business. So.
Yeah, I think Kevin took that photo during the 45 days of terror reign that we saw during that time.
That's period. Right. Oh, we're defending our gates, but we're good. Most of us died, but we're okay.
A few questions that have come in. One on high balance FHA loans, still a lot higher rates than non-high balance FHA. That makes sense to me. How different is the difference between those rates now compared to historically where they have been? Jason, I'll throw that one to you.
Well, I think that's a little bit lender by lender, because really the high balance FHA loans are affected by delivery, right? And how you can securitize. There's a few rules around that and how you can execute or sell them into a trade with Ginnie. I don't know. I think we are a little bit more aggressive than others, because we are also in markets like Southern California and parts of Florida, et cetera, or New Jersey, where high balance is the market. And so I think it's just really more appetite. That's my only 2 cents. Kev?
Yeah, we're see this nice little smooth transition. We're liking where the high balance is at. I mean, just to what you're alluding to is, you pretty much have a 10% limit. And they call that de minimis rule. Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie, they don't want you to pool more than 10% of those loans in there that are high balance. Remember, high balance really was created after the Great Recession as an accommodation to provide liquidity to the marketplace. Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, FHFA, they don't want it. HUD, they don't want this. They don't want higher loan amounts. There's an old adage in the business that says, if you have a $100,000 loan, you have a problem. If you have $1 million loan, the bank has a problem. They don't want to lend it right now, which is a reason why people are going back to Redwood, like you mentioned, Rob, because there's a lot less liquidity on the jumbo side, tremendously less liquidity, which will ultimately bring some of the pricing down in some of the higher price markets. And so, we're all out there on the streets. We see that there's multiple bids. There's not enough supply. We were undersupplied coming into this. Now rates are higher than ever. Purchase activity is the highest in 11 years as far as applications. We have a supply problem. And on the high end side, jumbo lenders who, you're starting to read about the CLO problem, not chief lending officer problem. They don't have a problem with me. They have a problem with with collateralized loan obligations. So, you've got banks that hold about 70% of the paper out there in these CLOs, which is a big topic of discussion. Some story broke out last week and then over the weekend. So banks, again, are kind of tightening up and puckering up, and what's the best use of our capital? And so you're seeing some tightening on the high balance side. Again, every lender's different. Like Jason mentioned, it just depends on your footprint. If you're doing more loans, then your 10% is bigger than what it was before, and so you just have to balance that. But those price hits that we get hit with, if we deliver 10.01% high balance into a pool or to a specific aggregator, the hits are huge. I mean, they're 4 or 5 points, 400, 500 basis points added to your loan at time of delivery if you go over those 10% thresholds de minimis. So, high balance can be kind of a wonky thing to balance. We feel good about where we're at on that right now, just because volume overall is much higher everywhere. And when you're doing a lot more refinances, the loan amounts are larger, even in the conforming loan buckets. So, maybe if you're at 250, you're at 280, or 325, just generally on loans, because refinances tend to be larger loan amounts. And that just, nationally, that really raises your total volume amount. I know a lot of people are having great months here. So, just another thing to navigate through, just another minefield, pothole, but it's what it is, and it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, just piggybacking on that, Kevin. I mean, just exactly right. I think overall you just have to, like you said, balance it out. I think the real challenge is probably with high balance is going into next year. You alluded to it on the inventory. Inventory is at an all-time low. I mean, we don't see inventory coming back on the market. You got certain markets in this country that maybe high balance isn't high balance. Maybe it's what it is, and so where that should be addressed is more maybe on the advocacy side of changing some of these loan limits in certain markets where people can't find a house cheaper.
Great.
Question coming. I'm assuming Mr. Cooper has got a handle on all their initial forbearance. The cost of their rates have dropped from 16 points to now in market with others on Govy loans. That's what it feels like anecdotally to me. Rob, any color there on Mr. Cooper?
No. Well, I will say I've got two things. I didn't want to interrupt Kevin or Jason on the high balance stuff, because I have an opening paragraph because I continually am asked what, my high balance pricing stinks, why? And it's not so much Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie, it is SIFMA, who basically sets the rules for mortgage-backed securities and delivery tolerances and so forth. And Kevin was right. They came out, several years ago saying, okay, maximum of 10% on high balance loans in these pools or else. And so what companies tend to do, what investors tend to do is swing in the other direction, like really try to discourage a lot of high balance loans coming in to their pools, because it's easy to go over that 10% with one, big loan. So with regard to your question, Rich, Mr. Cooper and so forth, obviously one of the few publicly held companies. And so everybody watches their financial results quite closely. And I think, last week we had this Quicken rumor that they were going to go public as well, which to me, in my opinion, makes no sense. I mean, does Dan Gilbert really want to sit there in front of a bunch of analysts and answer questions about, Quicken's long-term goals when Dan Gilbert's done quite well, just, trusting his staff's instincts and his instincts. But with regard to Mr. Cooper, something to keep in mind is we saw in 2008, 2009, 2010, the big servicers out there who had these large portfolios, they started to put price hits and price adjustments on certain portions of their production or certain portions of their rate sheets based on their servicing portfolio's performance during that time period. So as a real simple example, I'll give you a real simple example that's wrong, or maybe it's right, I don't know. But let's say Wells Fargo is looking at, $1 trillion worth of servicing, and their loss on condo loans, for example, is 20 basis points, like across the board, because of delinquencies, foreclosures, whatever. They figure out they're losing 20 basis points on their condo out of this, $1 trillion servicing portfolio. Well, Wells Fargo, it doesn't take them long to say, you know what, let's put, that basis point hit on our rate sheets for our condo production. So whatever Mr. Cooper is doing, for example, Mr. Cooper is the largest non-bank servicer out there. And I'm sure they have enough loans to slice and dice to look at the performance of their portfolio and do whatever, they're seeing, translate that price into their rate sheet price. So it's I think it's important for the smaller servicers out there to watch, to your point, Mr. Cooper or Wells Fargo or AmeriHome, Chase, some of these larger companies, and see what's happening with their servicing portfolio, because the law of big numbers would suggest that that'll translate even into the smaller servicing portfolios. Going back to my example a few minutes ago, so the industry looks at Wells Fargo and says, wow, they're putting an X basis point hit on their condo loans on their rate sheet. I wonder what's going to happen to my condo loans, and is that something that we should be doing as well? So I think it's important to pay attention to the large servicers and what they're seeing and what they're doing price-wise.
Thanks, Rob. Couple other questions that have come in. One is, how have you changed your strategy in regards to post-closing QC/internal audit with more loans going direct to Ginnie, more loans going Ginnie direct? You lose some of the feedback that you may have been receiving where loans were sold to the aggregators. The other question, completely unrelated, but I'll throw them both out to the panel to react to, is just a general forward-looking question regarding housing prices. Do we see housing values reversing towards the end of the year? And are we essentially at the peak now? So the post-closing QC internal audit differences between Ginnie Direct and non, and housing values, I'll throw it out there to the group.
Sure.
I can go
first.
You got it?
Yeah,
Go for it.
So housing prices, I think low interest rates and low inventory and home buyers are still aggressive. I mean, they still want to buy a house. And I think we said this in one of a few weeks ago. I mean, now you have people getting jobs back that aren't homeowners, stuck in a 600 square foot apartment for I don't know, 2 months, going, God, I wish I had my own house. And I think those people see interest rates lower, have good job security, the ones that do, and there is no inventory. Well, not that there's no inventory, but it's really low. And so I think housing prices are going to be strong going forward. When is it going to change? Who knows? I don't know. On the post-closing side, we're still reviewing, and we review 100% of all of our files internally and then externally. Not 100% externally, that would be a little too expensive, but I think that's a question more of culture, integrity, etc., because you are required to self-report if you have material defects in any of your loans. So the feedback from ags is good. I think some of your operational people will argue that the areas, especially in government lending, FHA, there's a lot more lender discretion in FHA loans than there are in conventional loans. There's a lot more detail in guidelines in conventional loans. So that lender discretion area, I think, is a little bit easier in Ginnie Mae, but doesn't mean that if you don't have a material defect, or if you have a material defect in a loan, you don't have to self-report it. And for us, every one of our loans is reviewed 100%.
Yeah, well said. We definitely have a lot of control mechanisms in place. When you're a servicer, it's a big deal. So you have to be responsible. You're being granted the PIN, and that great power comes great responsibility. So self-reporting is huge. Not taking advantage of that, being a churner. I see some of these other lenders out there. They go through these false claims act suits, and they get clipped by Ginnie for churning VA loans. It's just look, if you want to be in this game long term, you just have to do things the right way. And you're literally lending your own money, and you have to be capitalized. And I think it's all, everyone was stretched thin. It doesn't matter who you were. March and April had a lot of uncertainty in the industry. I mean, you talk about why would Quicken want to IPO so they can have cash. If they're going to be the number one lender in America, well, they've got to be capitalized more than anyone. So what happens when they had a market shock and everyone had margin calls? Did they answer the call? I don't know anyone at Quicken. I've met a couple people there. I don't really know anyone there, but I think the bigger a company is, the more cash you need. So go into the public markets. They have a great public reputation. Obviously they're our biggest competitor. Everyone's call, and we all want to beat them on every loan. But in the public landscape, everyone knows what Rocket Mortgage is, and so I don't think it'll be hard for them to raise a ton of cash. And cash is king. And so and as it relates to some of the other topics on housing prices, I think the markets with higher loan amounts are going to see would potentially be the only markets to even see a decrease year over year on any given month. So I just don't know if that's going to happen. And that's mostly because jumbo lending is so tight. Banks are, tightening up on their cash, how much they need for write-downs, how much they need for these forbearances that actually turn into defaults and foreclosures and go through all of that. Thank God this California bill got killed, because that would have made default servicing much more expensive on the larger loans here in California. Some people say California is like 30% of all volume out there, in the industry. So I think the home pricing in most markets where jumbo isn't as prevalent, I think will be positive generally. Now, I'm trying not to be a perma bull, and look a little bit ahead. Will there be some lasting effect of the unemployment? 70% of the people who lost their jobs were making less than $30,000 a year. They aren't exactly, the target for being a home buyer. Now, they could, in smaller markets, be a first-time home buyer, but we're still at 80% employment. 80% employment generally. So we have the cheapest rates ever. So I don't even think, like, looking long term, that there'll be that much of a pullback in price. Money's too cheap right now, and we were undersupplied coming into this. I read some great research. For those of you that know Ivy Zellman Research, Barry Habib has a great relationship with her, introduced me to her. She puts out fantastic daily emails. If you ever get a chance, you want some raw data. I mean, the builders are taking their sweet ass time. They got burned so hard in 2008. They don't want to put it out there again. They didn't get hurt too bad here in the last 90 days, 120 days. And where else is the supply coming from? I mean, no one's come up with the tiny home. No one's mass producing the tiny home out in the exurbs to get away from all the densely populated places yet. No one has come out and said, we're going to make, thousands and thousands of units of 3.2s that are a little bit smaller than the rest, and the price is in line for the first-time home buyer. I mean, the big builders, they're just taking their time and setting the price, just like the bottom feeders are on these portfolios coming up in the year, and then the bottom feeders on non-QM. I mean, it's like supply and demand, and there's only a few suppliers of money and product. So that's kind of my take on pricing and housing outlook.
Excellent. We are about out of time. I'll give another minute or so for any final questions anybody may have. And Ivy Zellman out of Cleveland, Ohio. But
she's awesome, man. She's so good. So good.
So, one last question I have for the group. It was something you just touched on, Kevin. It's something that has been talked about a lot, and it's just the lack of affordable housing in America for first-time home buyers in general. You mentioned home builders, and really not in their best interest to build homes under a certain price point. Changed a little bit. I know some of the big corporations, Google and Apple, have invested a lot of money in affordable housing that will hopefully have some impact. But how do you guys see that just playing out in general? Dilapidated homes that fall off the market being replaced by new builds that are at a different price point, and how that could impact real estate finance and real estate market in general over the course of
I have a kind of a pessimistic view on this. So let me start so Jason and Rob can take it home. And I have been running scared my whole life. I feel like this is a country where the rich get richer, and we haven't even started to talk about job automation and where that's really going. I mean, supposedly 40% of all the jobs that were lost aren't even going to be replaced. And that's not necessarily because of automation and robotics and AI. That's just because people have shifted to more e-commerce type stuff and there's a new normal. So I think especially with money as cheap as it is now, the cheapest it's ever been. Anyone who makes a house or sells a house, of course they want the highest price. So who's going to build the cheap house? I mean, who's doing it? Like who wants to build a cheap house when there isn't enough high price houses and prices are getting inflated? Look at the conforming loan amounts. Conforming loan amounts went up. It's getting harder to get into that starter house. I'm thinking you're going to have to go to some of these other markets to see a lot of people from Southern California move into Coeur d'Alene, and a lot of them used to move to Nevada, and they're moving to all these different places in Boise. Maybe in some of the up and coming cities you'll have to move to get a starter home, but there's no one out there making it. Google and Apple, they want to make it. Okay, they want to make it because they don't want to move their headquarters, and it's completely self-serving. But on a national grand scale, I don't see any resolve. I don't see any solution. I don't see anybody going out of their way to make the little the container cart home and furnishing on the inside. And I've seen some of that, but it's just not enough. I mean, there's just billions and billions, trillions of dollars at play, pumping up the prices of housing, and I don't see a good end to that until, honestly, like maybe the government, this could be a landmark regulation or some kind of CRA, if you will, of low to moderate income housing being built, subsidized by our government, either state or national level. Until that sets in, these capitalists are just going to make as much money as they can. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think maybe Rob can close us out, but my 2 cents, I'm aligned with Kevin. I think one of the challenges is going to be intermigration. I think people are going to have to move to find affordability. This is a new world now with this pandemic. So many more people can work remotely, and a lot more companies are getting comfortable with that. It said this before. I think commercial real estate is going to really take a bath here in the next few years with that. But the inventory problem and the affordability problem is not an easy one to solve. Most housing stock that people buy come from existing home sales, not from new home sales, and home builders are still not able to catch up to the inventory needs that they need to build just to keep in line with the demand. And to Kevin's point, it's too expensive, and a lot of that comes from the regulatory environment that they have to deal with, which is really, really city, county, municipality. I mean, all these challenges that they have, and it probably will take some sort of federal, approach to how home builders can build or where they can build, or I'm not too sure. But definitely there's no affordable housing being built, and it just doesn't make sense for the builders right now until someone steps in.
Rob, take us home.
Take us home. I'm stocking up on NyQuil because I'm getting ready to do my commentary tomorrow. I'm a buyer. You talk about housing values. I'm a buyer. I don't see values going down dramatically. Both to Jason and Kevin's point, there's a lot of reasons why, and I write about it all the time. Housing is determined by supply and demand. There's not a lot of supply out there. Now, interestingly enough, on Lennar's call this morning, they were talking about how they have a concerted effort to train some of the folks who have been laid off, like restaurant workers or hospitality workers, train them in construction. And so, for the last 5, 10, 15 years, we've heard about a shortage of land and a shortage of labor and permit costs going up. Well, Lennar's out there doing something about it and trying to retool some of these people who were working at Marriott who don't have a job now. So hats off to any builder who's doing that. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a nice quarter-acre lot, 20 minutes outside of downtown Seattle or San Francisco or Dallas, you're not going to find it. There's a lot of supply and demand dynamics that are going on out there. I'm a fan of the tiny home cargo container movement. I have too much stuff to live in one, but I admire people who do. And so it's interesting. It'll sort itself out. I just don't see prices going down, and I think that lenders who are out there lending one loan at a time, once again, yeah, they've got kind of one eye on the horizon, thinking about trends in general, and the other eye on trying to help their borrowers on a day-to-day basis. But Rich, I just don't see, given the supply, given the demand by people in their 20s and 30s, you know, the couple who've been in a one-bedroom apartment on some 10th floor of a high-rise in some city for the last 3 months, and you know, don't allow sharp objects in their place anymore for fear of, you know, fight breaking out. I think they want something in the suburbs, and certainly the work from home environment right now. You know, the hiring, you don't have to be 20 minutes outside of downtown San Francisco to work for a company like Bay Equity or Parkside Lending that's in downtown San Francisco. You could be in, you know, Illinois, you could be in Fairbanks, Alaska. So I think we're seeing a shift here that's been caused by the last 3 months of this virus, and I think it'll continue. But in terms of housing values, I'm, you know, like I said, I'm a buyer. I'd be happy to buy something right now, but the prices aren't going down. You know, they're bidding more. So anyway, I took it home.
Excellent. Gentlemen, insightful discussion as always. Greatly appreciate your time and your contributions. And as long as you continue to be willing, we're going to continue to put this call on the board every few weeks here, and really appreciate it. Also appreciate all the attendees, and close to 80 at one point, which is always great. And we will, as always, follow up by sending everybody out a link with the recording of the presentation in the morning. So, but thanks again, everyone. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you all soon. Take care.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you. See you guys.